Welcome back, Nets fans. Been a while. I have not talked to you guys since the season was over. Probably like a month ago at this point. It's been a while. But yeah, the Nets, of course, got swept this year. And I did say in that video I was going to make a season recap at some point, and I just have not gotten to it. So I wanted to fulfill my promise. So we'll talk about the Nets season this past year, maybe some off-season stuff. I do want to touch on the big three that should have been because, this was the same day James Harden lost in Game 7 for the second time in 3 years. So I do want to talk about that for a bit. So yeah, there's a few things to talk about. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the video, podcast, subscribe, like the video, all that stuff. And let's get into it. I was debating where to start, but I guess, screw it. Let's start with the Harden stuff because that happened today. It's fresh. So yeah, the Sixers had a 3-2 lead. They blew that, of course. Doc Rivers and James Harden, like, what'd you expect? So Harden was 3 for 11, had 9 points, was a minus 30, 5 turnovers, only 3 field goals made. So nothing much of a surprise there for Harden, who I think has lost like 3 Game 7s now, I'm pretty sure. He had that one where Chris Paul got hurt when he was in Houston. They were up 3-2. Of course, Brooklyn was up 3-2 in 2021. I mean, Harden played on one leg, so I can't really blame him entirely. And then today. So, yeah, I mean, Harden's had a rough time there with the Game 7s lately. But going back to his decision to leave the Nets back in the trade deadline, February of 2022, I get why he did it. It did not go down the way he envisioned. I think James Harden came here and expected to play alongside Kevin and Kyrie for most of the time. Of course, injuries and adversity was going to strike at some points, but, Kyrie sitting out half the year because of a vaccine was not really something they expected. But if James Harden's main thing was winning a championship, which he has said that's really all he cares about at this point numerous times. I mean, Harden has broke every individual record that he could basically back in Houston and has so many, scoring things and like scoring titles and stats, MVPs, whatever. So many individual accomplishments. The last thing the guy needs is a ring. And, when he made that decision to go to Philly in 2022, I was a bit surprised. I did figure he would test out free agency in the summer of 2022, but I never thought he was going to leave the Nets at the deadline. Like, I really did think that group owed it to each other to have a healthy playoff run. And as we know, 2021 was not a healthy playoff run. The Bucks series was just completely derailed by injuries. And I did want to see what it looked like. I mean, is it that hard to have, it's not, I'm not asking for much. Just one healthy playoff run together. We never got to see it. And seeing how the Sixers have gone the past couple years, like, does Harden look back at that and say, maybe I should have just hung on for a couple more weeks and waited for Kevin and Kyrie to come back and gave it a chance with Brooklyn. So I really do think that was his best shot. And I could say the same thing for even like Kyrie and KD. Kyrie's future is kind of unknown because he's a free agent, but assuming he goes back to Dallas, I mean, is that team ever going to go anywhere? I mean, if they get a third star, maybe, but I know the new CBA is going to make that tough to do. So that whole Dallas thing seems kind of iffy. KD and Phoenix, I mean, they have no depth. I mean, Chris Paul is like 38. He might retire. Who knows? DeAndre Ayton, they're saying like, oh, he might get traded. He might stay. I don't know. But he was, not that great in this series. There were some plays where he was lacking hustle. So those situations don't look too great. And for James Harden, I mean, he can leave Philly this offseason. He might go back to Houston for all we know. So looking at how that's played out, like, does James Harden look at that and say, man, I probably should have just stuck it out with the Nets? Because, ultimately, last season, I know the Nets got swept, right? But they lost by like 16 points combined, right? A sweep's a sweep, but still, if you replaced Harden in that series, and I've said this before, if you put Harden in that Celtics series last year, the Nets might have won that series in 6 or 7 games. It would not have shocked me, Ben Simmons obviously did not play, so you got nothing from him. Drummond was terrible in that series, and Seth Curry was fine, but he's Seth Curry. So if you put James Harden in for Seth Curry, I think the results would have been way different in that series. So, yeah, the Nets may have beat Boston last year. Who the hell knows? And even this year, the East is not good this year. I mean, Boston looks more beatable than they did last year. Milwaukee got out in the first round. You have an 8 seed in the conference finals. You know what I mean? Like, there's not many teams that look that great. Cleveland was like the fun, sexy team. They got beat by the Knicks in 5 games. So, you know what I mean? like not even Harden, but it's just disappointing that this Nets team and Nets core didn't finish out this year. I think if Kevin and Kyrie even stayed, not even Harden, if Kevin and Kyrie stayed, they could have made some noise this year, but it is what it is. I just think Harden kind of lacks some foresight with that move he made back in 2022. I get it was frustrating, but once again, like, all they had to do was wait a couple more weeks until Kevin and Kyrie were back, and like the big three would have been back together. He goes to the Sixers and plays with the guy in Embiid who's never been past round 2. He plays with Doc Rivers, known choker in the playoffs. I mean, I don't know. I mean, once again, I don't know what makes the man happy. Apparently, he didn't love the Brooklyn area, didn't get along with Steve Nash. There were other factors, but if it was about winning a ring, probably would have been best to just stay in Brooklyn. But, I could be biased saying that, but I truly think, like, hey, that was probably his best shot. I think the 2021 season, if he didn't get hurt, that was his best chance of winning a title. And going forward, if he stays in Philly or just tries to ring chase somewhere else, I don't know. I just feel like Harden's way too inconsistent. We saw in this series, I mean, with Boston, he had like 3 games where he looked like vintage Harden, and the other 4 games, he was just pretty trash. So, I don't know, especially today in Game 7. Very disappointing outing for him. So, that's it for the Harden stuff. But anyway, looking at this Nets season as a whole, it was a weird season, obviously. It felt like 2 different seasons if you split them up in half. But the first, few weeks were pretty rough. I mean, you had like a 1-5 start. Steve Nash gets fired. Right after that, you have the Kyrie posting the Amazon link, and he got suspended for like 7 games. And then in that time, Jacques Vaughn takes over. The Nets were in rumors to get Ime Udoka. Apparently, the NBA did not allow Udoka to coach in season. They wanted him to be suspended for a full season. Okay, I respect that. I still think the Nets jumped the gun by extending Jacques Vaughn multiple times. Like, if he was extended for 1 year, I'd be like, okay, that's fine. But they extended Jacques Vaughn for like 4 more years or 3 more years. It's just crazy in my opinion. Anyway, they went on this stretch from November 27th until January 8th, which is the game Kevin Durant got hurt, where they went 18-2, as we know. So they won 18 of 20 games. They were half game out of first place. I went to that next game. They played versus Boston on January 12th. If the Nets won that game, they would have been in first place. And of course, they lost that game. They lost 4 in a row. So it was like back-to-back years where KD got hurt and the Nets started to fall in the standings. But we're used to that. And, they got back on track, sort of. I think the Nets were the 4 seed. Then they had that game in Boston, February 1st, where they got blown out. A couple days later, the Kyrie Irving news comes out. He requests a trade. A lot of weird stuff happened. Cam Thomas had the 3 straight games, scoring 44, 47, 43. They went 1-2 in that time, as Jacques Vaughn loves to point out. But, yeah, and of course, KD. We should have seen this, by the way, because I know KD did not show up for the Nets-Clippers game on February 6th, but he did show up for the February 7th game against the Suns. And I feel like a lot of people didn't put that together. Like, why would he show up for one game and not the other? And we knew in the offseason that KD's preferred destination was the Suns, so we probably should have put 2 and 2 together. Like, oh, he's at the Suns game, but not the Clippers game. Why is that? And like, yeah, it makes sense because a couple days later, he was a Phoenix Sun. Speaking of that trade, big fan of it. I mean, do I miss having KD as a net? I mean, yeah, but, he didn't look great in the playoffs. I think it's kind of a weird fit for him right now. They didn't really have Chris Paul for a lot of it in this series. I get it, but I feel like they weren't using KD to his max ability, which is a problem. Like, you are supposed to get the max out of your players. But yeah, they have a new coach now. Monty Williams got let go, so we'll see what happens there next year. But yeah, I feel like the Nets made out very well. Getting all those draft picks, it was like 5 first-round picks and some pick swaps, and getting Mikal, getting Cam Johnson, who is a restricted free agent, even getting Jay Crowder, who they put for a couple second-round picks. It's not a bad move. I think the Nets got a lot there for KD, and they got everything they could there for a 34-year-old who has, missed a lot of time the past few years. I mean, Durant missed about, a month and a half back in his first season off the Achilles. His first Nets season, he did not play at all, as we know. We signed up for that with the torn Achilles. The next year, he had a hamstring issue that kept him out for over a month. The year after that was the first MCL sprain, and then this past year was this year I should say, was the second MCL sprain when Jimmy Butler fell into him in the January 8th game, at Miami. So, injury-prone guy at this point in his career. You get 5 first-round picks. The Suns have a bit of a murky future, I will put it that way. But they could be really good too. I'm not gonna say, oh, the Suns are terrible, but they might be very good. Who the hell knows? Kyrie might go to the Suns and they might be great. I have no idea. But yeah, the Nets' second half of the season was kind of odd. So in the first game that all these guys played together, I'm talking about Dinwiddie, Finney-Smith, the twins, Cam Johnson and Mikal Bridges. The first game they all played together, the Nets started out with a record of, 33 and 23. So 10 games above 500. And they had weird stretches. They would lose 4 out of 5 games or 5 out of 6. Then they would win 5 out of 6. They had this weird trajectory ever since these guys joined the team together. So they had a stretch where they won 5 out of 6 games. Then they went on to lose 5 in a row after that. Then they won 4 out of 5 after that. And to finish out the year, they went 2-2 to close out the year. But the last game didn't matter, so really it was 2 out of 3. They won 3 in a row at one point in late March, early April. So yeah, it was a very streaky team, I will say. They had that amazing comeback at Boston. They were down 28. They won that game by 10 somehow, which is still one of the craziest Nets games I've ever seen. So yeah, look, we saw some bad games. I think it took this team a while to get, acclimated. And it's tough because the Nets were such a different team in the first half. It was a completely different roster. It could have been part of the reason they got swept because there was so much newness going on. This team was formed in mid-February, and the playoffs were here by mid-April. So you had 2 months basically to prepare for the playoffs and play a Sixers team. And yeah, the Nets probably should have extended that series to 5 or 6 games, but whatever. They would have lost anyway. But yeah, we saw some nice games in there. And the Nets, it's an interesting situation because they can go in so many different ways here. As I said, you have all of these draft picks going forward. You have a trade exception for 18 point something million dollars, which they can use. So the Nets have the assets to go all in for next year. Now, what would that be? Damian Lillard's name is always brought up. You hear sometimes Trae Young, you hear Karl Anthony Towns, you hear different names brought up. I don't know who's actually going to be available, but the Nets definitely have assets to make moves and get another superstar if they wanted to. If they really wanted to get somebody, if Dame Lillard's actually out there and he really wants to be a Brooklyn Net, it might happen. I'm not sure if I want that or not. It really depends on what the package is because you can make a lot of arguments for Damian Lillard to be a Net and a lot of arguments for Dame Lillard not to be a Net because he is going to be 33 next year. His contract's an insane amount of money. It's going to hurt you defensively. There's reasons not to want Dame Lillard here, but there are reasons to want him here as well. He's a very good player. He's been pretty durable the past couple of years. I think it might have been 2021 or 2020. He didn't play a lot, one of those years, but he played a lot this year. They pretty much forced him to sit the last 10 games of the year, so he's been pretty durable the last couple of years, and he might have had one of his best seasons of his career this past year. So Dame Lillard would be exciting. I kind of feel iffy about it. Kind of reminds me of the Harden situation. Not exactly because Harden's a different case, but you know what I mean. Getting a guy in his early 30s and wondering how much longer will his prime last for. Harden's prime did not last too long in Brooklyn. Harden was a Net in January of 2021. And his prime was over by whenever the playoffs was, probably May of 2021. So, ever since that hamstring in the Bucks series, he was not the same guy. So that didn't last too long. As for their free agents this year, they have Seth Curry unrestricted. They have Cam Johnson, who is restricted. Cam Johnson's just turned 27 recently, so still in the prime of his career. Yuta Watanabe unrestricted. He's 28 years old, 28 and a half years old. David Duke restricted and Drew Smith restricted. Maybe you bring David Duke Jr. back. I don't know. I know some people think he might turn out to be something. I don't know. I feel like his offensive game is too raw at this point. I don't know. Maybe he's something defensively, or I don't know. I would not be too sad if he's gone. He's a very good athlete. I could see it working out maybe, but who knows. Seth Curry's going to be 32. He's going to be 33 actually by next year. But with Seth Curry, it's weird because the Nets had every reason to trade Seth Curry at the deadline. They didn't do it. So, I think if you did not trade him back at the deadline in February, like, you might as well bring him back. Maybe that was the plan all along, but still, it's just very weird. I think Patty Mills can opt out, hopefully. I would really hope they would not have him on the roster next year. I mean, that was an awful contract. And seeing the way Bruce Brown plays for the Nuggets, it pisses me off so much. Like, Sean Marks has his guys. There's no doubt about it. But how you make that move from a basketball standpoint makes no sense. I know Patty Mills is tight with Ben Simmons. That probably meant a lot. But, I mean, that just makes no sense. From a basketball standpoint, taking Patty Mills at like 34 years old over Bruce Brown in the prime of his career for the same exact contract, it just makes no sense. Like a terrible move that we can absolutely see coming by Sean Marks. So that pissed me off. But speaking of Sean Marks, is he even here next year? I mean, I don't know. I mean, I would think so. They're doing these, I think he did the hell is it called? Like one of those season-ending press conferences, which would, usually tell you that I think the guy's coming back. I'm not sure, but it seems like no news has dropped yet about Sean Marks going anywhere. So I'm assuming that he's back next year. He's built this team already once before. Maybe he does it again, hopefully, but I don't know. I have lost confidence. I'm not going to lie. Like, Sean Marks at one point was probably one of the better GMs in the NBA, but the past 2-3 years, it has not been that good. And even letting Jeff Green walk. I mean, watching that series against, the Nuggets and Suns series, you had Landry Shamet out there who was, had a couple nice games for them, honestly, and he had some nice moments with the Nets in the 21 playoffs. And watching Jeff Green, who, he's not the same guy he was a couple years ago, but Jeff Green would have been useful for the Nets the past couple years. And then Bruce Brown, who, has gotten so much better as a player. I give him a lot of credit. So, and I saw that one play where Bruce Brown was chirping in KD's face, and he was trying to enter the Suns huddle. It was pretty funny. But, I don't know. It's just this entire situation's weird with this team. I don't know where they're going to go. If, Joe Tsai has said his religion is winning, if he really does believe that, they'll try to go all in for this year. And if you're Sean Marks, I mean, you're probably managing for your job at this point. Like, I think Sean Marks' leash is probably getting a bit shorter. It was definitely long a couple years ago, but his leash is getting shorter. I mean, whether it was Joe Tsai influence or not, and I definitely think it was, you did lose 3 superstars in a calendar year. I mean, that should stand for something. You know what I mean? Whether Tsai couldn't stand those guys or what, it does speak volumes when Harden, Kyrie, and Durant get out of your franchise in the span of 1 year. So I'm just saying, that definitely should add up to something. But anyway, I think that'll do it. I'm trying to think what my next video will be. Maybe touch on some draft prospects next time. It might be a while. I think the draft's probably like a month and a half away. I think it's late June. I always remember the draft being like a week after I got out of school back in grade school. So I would think probably in late June. Maybe they changed it. I don't know. But anyway, it sucked to see the Celtics win. I mean, it was such a weird series for me. Like, I hate both those teams. I really do. Like, I wanted to see Harden lose so badly, but I also really don't like Jason Tatum. I do not like Celtics fans. So to see them win was annoying as well. So at this point, I just want anyone to win, not name the Celtics. So I'm hoping that it comes down to Nuggets versus Celtics. I think the Nuggets have the best chance to beat them. Nuggets Heat will be better. I would take Nuggets Heat any day, but I for some reason don't think the Heat will beat the Celtics. It might go 6 games, but I just can't see it. I would love for the Heat to win that series. They were 1 shot away last year potentially from winning that thing, but Tyler Hero's out, Oladipo's out. It's just going to be a tall task. But anyway, we'll see what happens. It's been a fun playoff so far. I have enjoyed them for the most part. Not my own team, of course. They've pissed me off. The Nets have not won a playoff game since Game 5 of 2021 when KD had like the 49 points or whatever, and there was the picture of him hugging Steve Nash. So it was a long time ago. The Nets have been 0-10 their last 10 playoff games. Maybe they finally win one next year. But, personally, I kind of hope this team at least chooses a direction. That's important to me. Like, I don't want this to be the 40-win team that Joe Tsai wants. Either blow this team up and trade Mikal and trade, sign and trade Cam Johnson, trade Royce, trade DFS and Dinwiddie, get all the picks you can, and really build this thing up the next 4 or 5 years. Or you get a superstar and put yourselves in like, hey, if things do break right, we can win a finals with this team. Like, I do not want to stay where we are right now. This is not where I want to be. I hate being in the mediocre team in the league. That's where the Nets are right now. So I don't want to be here. So hopefully it's either you get a star and maybe get another, borderline all-star type guy and try to form like a mini big three with Bridges included. Or you blow the team up, which, hey, I mean, if that happens, it happens. It would kind of suck because we were so close to a title a couple years ago. But yeah, whatever happens, just choose a direction. That's all I have to say. But yeah, hope you guys enjoyed the video. I will talk to you guys next time.